There is an unprecedented mental health crisis in this country. How can churches rise to meet this challenge? Mental Health Ministry by Dr. Jared Pingleton is an innovative resource that shows churches how to effectively minister to hurting people. This book is a one-of-a-kind, biblically based, and real-world proven collection of practical ways that Christian ministries can make a very real difference in impacting the lives of those who are struggling with mental health. Available at Amazon, your local bookstore, or at trilogy.tv.
Hey guys, my name is Jared. I'm 37. I live in Laverne, California. First of all, it's an honor to get to share my mental health journey with you. Okay, so where it starts for me is childhood, which is where I think most things start for all of us. I grew up in Colorado, and my dad and I didn't have the best relationship. He was sort of undiagnosed depression. He was really angry. He never got any help for his issues. He sort of had an issue with alcohol, but my parents, they didn't have the best relationship, and a lot of that was because of my dad. My mom, on the other hand, was like the opposite. She was super loving, nurturing, supportive. But as a job, she was a flight attendant, so she was gone a lot. So I have one older sister, and for me, when I was younger, middle school, adolescence, high school, I was always very sensitive, very creative. I loved writing. I think my favorite subjects were acting, theater, musical theater, singing. I did really bad at math and science, and but I think a lot of the symptoms I had were sort of managed by having friends and going to church and playing hockey and just being very busy. But I definitely had a lot of ups and downs, and when I felt sad and I felt depression, I don't think I called it those things. I really did remember having lots of feelings of those things, but not enough to see a doctor, or I was able to sleep pretty well as a kid and function. And a lot of it was sort of masked with the social skills that I had. I was always good with people. Also, the faith part of my life, I was very involved in church. And so when I was 18, I went to this Bible environment, Bible school, college, prayer place. It was really intense. It was my first time away from home. It was really exciting, new. My level of spiritual growth and closeness to God and the Bible, and a passion to do ministry, a passion to communicate the gospel. That was all, it was like 10 out of 10 for that stuff. But after about 3 years in this environment, I really burned myself out. Wasn't taking good care of myself. I was doing kind of this all-night prayer watch thing as kind of sort of the way that I was involved in this place, and it was not a good decision as far as what it did to my body and my mind. So at about the 3-year mark, I had a bipolar episode. I didn't sleep for a month. What originally started with no sleep for a day, and then 3 days, and it was prompted by my mind was racing, couldn't get the thoughts out of my head. I had a really, really large amount of the spiritual word, like guilt and condemnation, that we read in scripture. So it was really intense. I ended up coming home to California. That's where my family was. I saw a doctor. I got some medication, and that was really probably the first time I heard the word bipolar. My parents were together at the time, so I didn't go to a hospital. I just kind of went home. Like parents, that was my safe place. And looking back, I was really grateful for that kind of family support. I ended up getting on meds, and then I got off the meds. Kind of my mom was the one that got me off the meds. So no one fully knew what they were doing. And then I started kind of feeling better too. So that made it a little bit easier to make that decision. Then, long story short, I really just went right back to my life. I finished my Bible school. I stayed involved in the ministry side of things. And then the same thing happened to me a year after the first episode. And this was 2008. I was just turned 23. And the second time around, different doctors, but a similar diagnosis of bipolar. And I ended up getting a lot of medication. So initially that was, I did okay. I was able to work a job, but then I went about 3 years taking a lot of meds for bipolar, which complicated subject. How do you know what's the right amount to take? And a lot of times we don't fully know. We just, we consult with the doctor and we just try to do the best we can with that. But I wasn't really doing therapy or anything else. I kind of just was taking the meds. So I decided to get off all the meds on my own. This was 2011, so this is about 3 years later. And I was really listening more to the advice of my friends and doing kind of what they were suggesting that I do. And I did really well for maybe 4 or 5 months. I weaned down to just only on a couple of things, but the mistake I made was I did it on my own. I didn't do it with a doctor. So what happened was I had a third episode, and this was 10 years ago. This was 2012. And it was the worst episode that I had ever had. It was way worse than those earlier ones I just talked about. And part of it, looking back, was that was because I got off the meds, like on my own. So I went back to California. I went to the hospital a couple of times where I was living in the Midwest, and I was there on my 27th birthday. But I ended up having like a 9-month episode where I had a lot of suicidal thoughts. I had had some of that in previous episodes, but this time around it was way, way worse. I had a spiritual component to it, thinking about, what happens to us when we die, which those are not the best thoughts to have when you're feeling suicidal, thinking about, heaven and hell and all these things that, we were taught in church. And I did, have my family with me, but it was really hard on my mom. It was just me and her, and my sister was there. My brother-in-law was there. My dad wasn't very involved, but I ended up getting through it. I did have a few suicide attempts in that time, or 2 suicide attempts, and I ended up in the hospital. And then I tried to overdose May of 2013 with all the medicine that I had. Ended up in a coma and had a lot of people praying for me. And I survived. I came out of the coma. I do believe that was a miracle from God. And what happened was, after that, after I was in this coma, I spent 5 months in recovery, getting better. And luckily I did get better. I saw a doctor. I got some new medicine that I never tried before. And I really started to kind of merge my faith experiences, my love for God, my love for the scripture, my love for the gospel, with sort of what we call acceptance, or what you hear people say, which is acceptance. You'll hear that word a lot when people share their stories, because I think there's just a natural separation that takes place when we either don't go on meds because we want God to heal us, or we think it's less faith to do medication, or we're not fully accepting that we need medication. And I'm not saying that's the only answer. I think for a lot of people, meds needs to be a part of the solution for a little while. And maybe their faith gets in the way of that. But for me, it took a while. It was, 2007 to 2013 of not fully accepting the illness, and then 5 months of recovery in 2 different hospitals. Had a lot of time to read and think and journal, and so many conversations with people with all different stories and backgrounds. And I look back at that now 10 years later, realizing that all of that was God's provision in the story, in my story. I got out of the hospital the 5 months, and I ended up moving to where I live now, Pomona, Laverne. Got involved in a church, and definitely have had some bumps in the last 10 years. I had about 6 years of not going to the hospital, and then I had a relapse a few years ago, and then came out of that as well, and got involved with the National Alliance of Mental Illness, and I've been doing speaking for about 4 years, I think, now with them, and I've done about over 100 talks just like that, like just sharing what I just shared with you guys. I have a podcast where I interview people and have conversations, and I don't say that stuff to brag. I say that to say that those are just a couple of things that have helped me. Talking, getting to share my story. Not everybody has a podcast. That stuff's interesting to me, so I've done that, and that's been fun. That's a fun thing. But I will say also that I do stay connected to my church community. I try to stay connected. I do a book club on Sundays with a bunch of friends, and we're not really reading mental health books, but we pick a book and we go through it, and it's like a 2-3 hour thing, and we talk and hang out. And I try to do therapy, to be honest. I have a clinic that I go to where I get help. So recovery, staying stable, understanding how bipolar works. I still take medication. I talk. And then I think what's newer for me has been really trying to be healthy physically. I think sometimes we get on meds and we try to do the therapy thing, and then we kind of forget about our bodies, and we don't always realize that the illness and the symptoms is stuff that physically, like, we have to exercise. I started playing hockey again in March, so I don't play every day. That'd be fun if I did, but I try to do things where I move. I love coffee and, sugar, but you got to be careful with how much of that you have every day. So switch to matcha. That's what you guys should do. And also, lastly, just community. I've talked about how my family was there in those episodes, and I'm still close with my mom, and I do still talk to my dad sometimes. My sister lives in Seattle, and she has 4 boys, so nephews. Christmas was awesome this past year, and being involved in their lives is a huge thing. So all of those things together, and lastly, continuing on the faith journey. Like, I still follow the same God that I've followed when I was 5 years old, and different thoughts and different insights. And, scripture says that God doesn't change, right? I think seems pretty clear, right? And if we use scripture and we use other disciplines to help us understand God, I would say that talking to people and having friends in my life and having these conversations and kind of staying curious about mental health, because it's such a big subject, that kind of keeps things fresh, kind of keeps things in perspective, and then getting to share my story like I am with you guys right now. That is sort of the icing on the cake for recovery. So thank you guys for letting me share my story with you. And I look forward to the future. All right. Thanks.
Thanks so much for listening to this presentation of Voices of Hope. We're thrilled to be providing this conference and the resources it has to offer. Fresh Hope for Mental Health is a faith-based mental health ministry offering support groups, free resources, and effective ministry programs, which are all based upon 25 years of clinical research. Support includes faith-based mental health support groups for adults and teens, both locally and online, trauma healing groups, hope coaching, a retreat for pastors and ministry leaders to process the wounds of ministry, plus help for widows. Fresh Hope also helps churches implement effective mental health ministries within their local settings and communities. You might say that Fresh Hope is a plug-and-play ministry for churches to embed into their ministry. Visit freshhope.us to find out more.